Next is our panel discussion, the 5G Leaders Forum. So let's welcome our guests for this panel. They are Ravi Kumar Palepu, Head Network Services and 5G at Prodapt. And we also have Jason Carolan, Chief Information Officer at Flexential. Welcome to both of you. Thanks so much for joining us for this panel discussion.
Thanks a lot, Neil.
Thank you very much indeed. So just to give you a little bit of background, first of all, on Ravi and Jason. Ravi is the Senior Vice President and Global Head of Network Services and 5G at Prodapt. Ravi has extensive experience in delivering complex OSS, BSS, digital transformation programs and product solution GTM with a focus on emerging technologies to address the demand and challenges of the telecom space. So we're in very good hands there. And Jason, I'm sure you won't mind me saying you've got 25 years of experience in leadership positions in product architecture, software engineering, technical sales and support across a variety of companies. So as I say, we are in very, very good hands today. So where shall we start? I think we need to lay a bit of groundwork first about the key benefits and opportunities that 5G technology brings to organisations. I put this out to both of you. What for you are the real key benefits that 5G technology can offer to an organisation?
I think if I go first, Jason, so one is definitely everyone is talking about speed, right? And what we know is 5G can go up to 10 GB speed. And what it means really is in terms of how quickly we can launch products and services in the market, right? And typically, if you look at the fixed line services, we typically used to talk about 60-day cycle, 90-day cycle to lay the fiber and so on and so forth. So 5G is a lot faster when it comes to meeting the demand of both the business as well as the consumer side, right? The second part, which is very interesting, is the latency part of it. And why latency is really important. So when you really embark into digital transformation journey or a digital roadmap, the time is very, very critical for us. So how quickly we want our systems to respond, how quickly we want the AI to give us insights where we can make informed decisions instantly, both in terms of from an organization perspective, but also from an individual perspective. So latency is certainly a 5G which can drive a lot of our use cases going forward. The third part is reliability, right? And the 5G provides a fantastic reliability, no call dropouts, completely 100% uptime kind of a network, which really gives a position that a company can really trust on that infrastructure and network to provide any sort of use cases on top of it. So these are fundamental, I would say, three buckets where 5G has actually driving a lot of those scenarios and use cases that we are seeing in the market.
Jason.
Yeah, I certainly agree with what Ravi mentioned. I think downloading movies faster is not really the primary use case. I would imagine, and I think enabling companies to be able to do their work faster, more efficiently, really is the key. Not really having to manage a whole bunch of different network architectures and network infrastructure. I think that's a huge benefit of 5G, fixed wireless, et cetera, is really no longer have to worry about wired and Wi-Fi and all the other different services. You can really do it just with 5G. It's also exciting to me just from the access to data and the ability to get new data sources and new telemetry online. I think I saw an article about 2 months ago that said the large language models will essentially run out of data because we're not just generating data fast enough for them to really rebuild their AI models. And I think services like 5G, 6G, IoT, just in general, will be very powerful in terms of giving AI even more insights to be able to help in a lot of different ways, right? Whether it's climate change, whether it's patient outcomes, whether it's safer cities, and all the other different use cases that we hear about quite often.
I think we've sort of scratched the surface there of some of the benefits, but what I want to do is link those benefits, because let's face it, this is the 5G Leaders Forum. What do leaders have to do in the 5G space to make sure that organisations are prepared to realise those benefits? I guess that's the difficult question.
Yeah, I guess one is you have to have a clear strategy and a vision as to what we really wanted to achieve with 5G. Because I have been in discussion with a number of different CX leaders where you could potentially do a lot of your use cases with even Wi-Fi or a 4G, for example, or your private networks. So you need to have a real understanding about what your strategy is, what your vision is, how really 5G can really fit into those clear visions and strategy, right? The second part, which is very interesting, is that we have gone through the same journey with cloud and AI and so on other technologies, is what is a real use case that you want to deliver, right? And whether that use case is really delivering the business outcomes that you're looking for, whether it is really delivering the ROI that the organization will look forward to. So having a real business case with the clear metrics of measuring those kind of outcomes is extremely, extremely important, right? It's not about purely a technology, because 5G should be never looked at from a technology perspective, but it is a business change. So we need to understand the readiness of an organization, whether it is people, whether it is technology, whether it is correct infrastructure, whether the customer segment or enterprise segment that you are targeting, whether it is going to deliver or drive the value towards that or not. So readiness across your customer, product, and network lifecycle is extremely important. So are we ready from that perspective, right? Investment is again a huge cost. 5G is not cheaper. You have a lot of legacy systems. You have to migrate onto the newer systems. So what is your investment strategy? How far you want to go with it, and whether you want to take a kind of a pragmatic approach of doing it in a phased manner, or you want to do a big bang. So those are the strategic decisions that you have to take. And one of the important aspect is training of employees. Because if a leader understands 5G and the rest of the organization doesn't follow what the strategy really means and how it's going to derive value, it's not going to be successful anyway. So how we are really taking an organization point of view and really educating them, making sure they understand what the value that 5G can deliver is extremely important. So we have to work as a team and grow as a team. And last but not the least is, as a leader, you have to also understand and pick your right partner. Collaboration. 5G is not just a single shop where you just go and buy solutions and just deploy. It is a kind of ecosystem that you're trying to build. So you have to select your right partners and make sure that your strategy is very clearly articulated to those partners to drive outcomes. So these are a number of different, I would say, factors that plays a very critical role for any leader to look at and see, whether they are making the right investments or not.
Yeah, I mean, I think the partnership angle is super important, and I like to think a lot about this kind of architecturally and thinking about the data. It's one of the largest decision factors now for one of our customers is the network, right? And whether that's the front haul capabilities that we're talking about with 5G and RAN and things like mobile edge compute, but also backhaul services, cloud fabric connectivity, being able to get to the hyperscalers, because really the data architecture now is becoming much more complicated, right? Because it's hitting all these different networks and different pieces of the network, whether it's ingestion of IoT data, whether it's being able to do inference at the mobile edge compute side to figure out what to do with that data, and then eventually dealing with it, getting up to your enterprise data warehouse or whatever your data lake technology might be, because you don't want to throw it away because you might need it later, right? So all of this becomes a very dynamic network-based conversation that has a bunch of different pieces. In cloud, we talk a lot about hybrid, right? Kind of hybrid cloud and sort of picking the right approach for the right type of workloads and use cases. I think it's very much the same around enabling networks and being more efficient to be able to deliver services, because as Ravi pointed out, latency really is the big factor now. So if you can go take 40 or 50 milliseconds out of the IP stack, essentially, then it becomes, how fast is my application? How do I build better responsive applications and utilize things like mobile edge compute to make it, faster, better, and frankly, a higher fidelity experience based on whatever those needs might be, like VR, AR, and things like that.
As I finish things off with Mark from Nokia in the previous presentation, looking at advice, and I'd like to get some advice from both of you here, because a key aspect of what we're talking about here a real key theme of today is about translation. The benefits of a lot of this technology, whether it's 5G, whether it's cloud, a lot of what we've talked about today are obvious, and they're very obvious for the more technical parts of a business. Yet translating that to maybe other parts of the business can be the challenge. What advice would you both have to make sure that information and those benefits are properly translated to the rest of a business?
The challenge part really is today, if you look at in any organization or any enterprise, 5G is not kind of defined as a single unit or single department which will take care of all the decisions and broader strategy and a vision. It is pretty much an organization, which is rightly you mentioned that how we connect with the dots with the rest of the organizations here. But I think what is interesting here is we have to look at, again, in a pockets of where 5G can be implemented. So for example, if you're looking at smart factory as an example, so are you looking at remote test and diagnostics of a device as a critical success factor? Or you're looking at, for example, health and safety of the employees? Are you looking at how I can create an aggregation of IoT information to provide more insights about my supply chain, my production line? Are you looking at maybe the entire CSR aspect of smart factory and how I can keep the site more healthier, safer for people to work? Or you're really looking at the augmented reality, virtual reality based test, the remote test and diagnostics and resolutions part of it. So there are a number of different elements which comes into 5G, which can drive value both on terms of the cycle time to market, your cost to operate, and so on and so forth. What is interesting enough is you have to take one department at a time in terms of this is my biggest of priority, this is where I need to focus on, and how I can really work with that team to implement something, test the entire solution, test the infrastructure, test the use case, see the return of investments on the back of it, and really take that entire solution into different aspects of your entire manufacturing unit, so-called. So if you try to attack that at a larger organization scale, it's extremely difficult because everyone will look for what is in for me and what is ROI, which is very difficult to justify. And as Jason mentioned, what is also a very interesting aspect is, which we come across where we spend months and months with the customers, is what is the right fit solution for them, right? So today you have a great telecom operators who are providing fantastic 5G network and connectivity on the back of it. Then you have hyperscalers, then you have private cloud providers, then you have edge providers. So how should I go and pick what solution will work for me and what kind of use case can deliver purely by the edge? I don't need a 5G infrastructure. In certain cases, I can do very well with the cloud. I don't need edge compute, for example. So those are very critical decisions. And what it means is an individual or a department or a unit cannot just make those decisions. That has to sit with an operations team to really understand what they really wanted to put their use case on and try to bring all these technologies together.
Jason, any further you add to the advice?
Yeah, I mean, I think Ravi's spot on. I think it's still relatively new technology, right? So I think being able to work with the business, getting some quick wins to be able to prove some proof points, so to speak, and maybe even coming up with some heuristics or patterns, what works, what doesn't work, some simple KPIs. I remember the company formerly known as Twitter, they had a rule basically, if you were putting code into the platform, you could basically do whatever you wanted to as long as they could ensure that the ability to rebroadcast tweets was 1 second, right? So their grand sort of heuristic on what governed and provided the guardrails of the platform was this 1 second response time to basically start reflecting tweets, back out of the platform. So coming up with those rules, I think, can help drive an organization to look at the right use cases, the right customer experience, and really, maybe get rid of some of the technology scariness that can happen when you're looking at something that's new that really does change the game in terms of latency and performance. And really, again, back to the quick wins, I think really help enable kind of what works, what doesn't work, and really starts to prove to the organization that things are possible and they can move faster, and some of the change management that's required to support that.
Yeah, that's very effective advice about that that translation and that communication. Jason, if I could just return to something you were talking about in a bit of depth, and Ravi, you mentioned briefly, and that's about picking partners, because there are plenty of options, plenty of good technology out there. For someone who's out there at the moment and they're going through that process of either selecting a partner, potentially changing a partner, what are the key things you two would both advise about actually going about that in the most effective way and finding what is right for your particular organization?
Certainly some companies like to start with research, right? They may go grab a Gartner report and figure out who's in the Magic Quadrant and sort of start, at that level. We very much like to, whiteboard and engage, with a sort of on-hands conversation with our customers and our prospects. I always tell our customers we have about 3,000, 3,400. But if you don't want to talk to your partner, then we're probably not the right, company for you, because we do want to engage. We do want to figure out how we can help and very much have a personal relationship with with our customer base. I also think sometimes companies don't understand the switching cost, and I think I know of a few projects that have been put on hold because of they thought that it would make sense to move one way or the other, and ultimately they maybe didn't calculate what the impact of switching might be. So I think understanding that big picture, when you go into a partnership conversation, because it's going to be, our contracts are now on the average of 5 to 7 years. I would say typically a customer is with us for 8 years or longer. So it's a long-term, marriage, right? And there's always going to be things that work and don't work, but being able to have that conversation, in a straight way is super critical.
Ravi?
I think it's pretty much what Jason has covered, but there are a few pointers that we need to look at, because every region has its own dynamics, for example, right? So if I'm specifically in Europe or UK or APAC, so first of all, who are the dominant partners in that space, which is very, very critical? What are the regulatory requirements that I need to consider? How the data can be pushed from within the country or outside of the country is again a very critical aspect, and that defines a lot of the partner strategy as a baseline for you to start with. And from there on, I think, again, going back onto this, that what you really wanted to achieve, because 5G offers both aspects. One is the monetization aspect and a cost efficiency aspect, which is how you can run your operations in a much agile, leaner, and faster way of running things, right? At the same time, you can create a digital ecosystems where you can bring in other partners and you can cross-sell, upsell a lot of your products and services to your end customers. So when you're picking a partner, whether you want to pick a global partner, whether you want to pick a regional partner, is a choice that you have to make depending on your business models, depending on your revenue models, and what you really wanted to achieve, right? The second part is, again, there are a number of different combinations that 5G offers, whether you can go with a private 5G as an option, whether you want to hook onto your carrier services, taking connectivity from the operators, or you can go with a combination of 4G, 5G, which is the entire NSA kind of an architecture. Now, in all of these options, the flexibility it gives is, as Jason mentioned, that what is the switchover cost? So you can actually look at that, hey, today my business looks at pretty much like going with a hybrid option compared to going a full-fledged 5G, because we also need to understand that 5G coverage is not across the globe, and we are not 100% 5G enabled. There are some lot of rural areas, remote areas where 5G is not available. So your use case, does it require those kind of connectivities? And if the answer is yes, it requires, then probably you need to work out what the infrastructure should be and how you're going to work with your partners in that sense. And last but not the least is, it's extremely, extremely important is which part of 5G that you really wanted to focus on, because a lot of the activities which I'm seeing at an enterprise level is at an edge level, right? And when you go into edge, I think that combination of architecture is completely different to a autonomous car which you are driving on the road, right? So from that perspective, again, picking up a partner, completely changes from one side to the other side, depending on the use case and the enterprise that you deal with. But these are, I would say, some of those areas to consider.
Yes, one size.
Sorry,
Jason.
Ravi touched on something there just around edge that I thought was important, because I think there is a lot of confusion in the industry on how edgy things need to be, right? So, in the United States, which is where I'm primarily focused, we have cloud providers that have now gone from the east and the west coast, and have the hyperscalers have moved into the middle of the country. kind of in the middle and in the south. So, the ability to get to a public cloud, is getting easier within, probably 500 to a couple, thousand miles. We have, data centers like ours, kind of spread across the country, which is edgy enough probably for a lot of applications. And then, ultimately, I know that RAN needed an ability to go manage its stacks, more local to the towers. But, ultimately, we're not seeing quite the mobile edge compute demand for all these other applications quite yet, because it turns out we have, great data centers spread across the country that's probably edgy enough for most applications. So I think some companies might get scared off just with, wow, the ability to go deploy an edge app is so complicated because I have to go touch 1,000 different, endpoints across the country or the world. And that really isn't the reality quite yet. Maybe we'll get there someday, some year, but I don't think it's there quite yet today.
And that's some great advice there. Really, one size not fitting all, and really being aware of your own personal circumstances and appreciating those. Now, while I've got your company, gents, what I did want to look at really is delving into your experience and your anecdotal experience of examples of really successful implementations and leadership strategies that you've seen when people are innovating and moving into the 5G space. Are there any that you'd want to surface that you've seen and thought, yep, that's exactly how you should do it?
I think there are a number of different use cases that we can take from the market. But personally, I've been involved in 8 of those use cases which are being delivered in the market. One is what we call personalization and contextualization, which actually means you see all the digital signage all over the place when you go to a shopping mall or to an airport. So how we can really personalize that experience, right? Typically, what you see in the past is that when any of our customer segments walks in, we play a standard kind of advertisement every 5 minutes, is flip over and go to the next advertisement, right? So what 5G has really enabled us is to really use the entire digital signage and the camera which is installed on top of it to really look at the segment of the customers that are in front of those digital signage, right? And the moment we understand that, the customer segment is roughly around this group, and this is where the gender diversity is, we automatically, we have a catalog of different ads that are being displayed and stored. We immediately play those messages based on the demographic of the customers. So that requires instant kind of streaming of the data and really taking a decision making in terms of what ad will resonate to those customers. So while it is only a split matter of seconds where the signage, you want to really contextualize and hit the message there and then. So that requires a phenomenal amount of work that we need to do, and that is one use case. The second part, which we have again piloted on a different number of areas, is around the fan experience. Right, the fan experience is how you can use your mobile app or AR/VR glasses. Really understand, you can actually navigate from one part of the stadium to a different part of the stadium. In the same app itself, what stores that are there in the stadium, what is the current queue time, how many people are buying the products and services. If you want to get any insights about a player, you just have to click it and all the insights will be available to you. So how we can bring in what I call the augmented reality, virtual reality, AI, and all the different content all together into a single kind of a device, which could be a mobile, which could be AR, VR glasses, and provide that information right up front to you. We also done certain pilots on what I call the remote surgery aspects, because a lot of these MET devices are pretty old legacy, and we are getting migrated into newer set of devices on the MedTech side. But what it really enables is how these devices gets connected to outside of your hospitals or your current infrastructure, so that any doctor can connect to remotely and really understand all that happening with the patients. They can do collaboration with other surgeons at the same time. They can use AR notes, for example, to really try to drive those conversations to say, hey, this part of the aspects that we need to look at, and bring the AI insights as we are discussing or the surgeons are discussing on the call. So all of those insights are instantly available to make more achievable, so to speak, in near future. So those are some of the pilots. And last but not the least is all about, for example, smart cities, where we are looking at smart traffic lights, smart parking, so on and so forth. So there are a number of different examples, and there are some great things coming from AT&T, Verizon, and last but not the least, which is very fascinating for me, is one of the things which Fox Sports are doing in terms of that when we actually do a coverage of any sports events, there's a whole set of cables that goes along and connected to the camera. So what we are looking at is we can completely go cableless, and we can use 5G enabled cameras, so you can pretty much remotely go and do the coverage. But at the same time, the content will be delivered to the consumers as fast as possible, compared to the delays that we are seeing right now.
I think you could carry on all afternoon, Ravi. You've got so many great examples. Jason.
Yeah, I mean, I love the gaming and the sports betting world here is really taking off, and have been helping a couple of partners solve some issues in the golf cart, whether that's being able to bet against their friends, or even better understand the course and start to add some AI elements to club selection and things like that, as well as video analysis for the player in real time, which is really couldn't be possible without 5G. Definitely on the smart city side, it typically starts with traffic management. We have an ambulance service that we have done a bunch of work with that has gone from efficient, the efficient delivery of the ambulance to the scene and trying to find the best possible route. But now it's much more about figuring out what hospital that ambulance is going to go to, and now working in real time with the ER staff. While the ambulance is en route, trying to make sure that the patient outcome and getting the data to the hospital is really the focus in terms of them being able to go take care of the patient as soon as they get there. In fact, even really before they get there. Another great one is our railway infrastructure is not very autonomous, but it does require a lot of video to be taken off of the trains. We call it positive train control. That technology is great for the trains because you can understand where the trains are going. Now that technology is being applied to a lot of the other autonomous vehicles, especially semis, which could be anywhere. And the issue there is being able to deploy technology stacks that can go take terabytes of data in real time, be able to bring it safely to a platform to store it, run analytics on it, eventually retrain some of the autonomous vehicle training models, to get smarter in terms of what it's doing, essentially in real time. So it's this combination of AI and 5G and IoT, I think is, we're just again at the early stages of that, but have seen some very successful deployments, and some challenges too, because sometimes the old, carrier hotels and the central office infrastructure that has been deployed in a country can't really support next generation workloads. So having to work with customers on where is the right spot to go put their latest and greatest NVIDIA EGX technology to do the job.
I think that just shows the wide scope of the potential of the technology. We've gone from personalised adverts to selecting golf clubs to managing transport networks to helping in an emergency room. It really shows the potential there and the wide breadth of usage. Jason, you were just touching on there on some of the challenges and considerations there, and I want to dig into that a little bit further because it's very easy for us to celebrate the successes. Let's look at some of the more difficult parts here. What other challenges and considerations are there for organisations, and what do they face when they're making that transition and trying to manage maybe a new 5G infrastructure?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've touched on a lot of it. One is it can be complicated deployments, right? So it's trying to understand, what the actual requirements and needs are. I would say there's still a fair amount of I would call it FUD, in the industry on everybody needs to go find an edge data center at a tower site to go do the job, and that's really not probably the truth in many cases, but in some maybe it is. I think the cost structure that Ravi talked about, we're not on 100% 5G. I think it was an Omdia article I was reading that 2024 is probably the crossover for the United States of more devices on 5G than LTE. But that doesn't mean the cost structure has come down to be able to support massive IoT deployments. I think it's still a cost prohibitive, thing for a lot of companies to get their head around, which is why we see, fixed wireless, why we see, even intelligent eSIM, capabilities that can dynamically reprogram themselves to get on the lowest cost network, depending on where they are. So definitely a lot of great things, around that. But, I think paying attention to the cost structure and also the organizational change management that Ravi touched on too, I think is another important piece, because, we're used to having a lot of latency in the network. That's kind of gone. There's different use cases now to be able to move data even faster, using SD-WAN technology. So there's a whole bunch of things that can kind of come to bear to really change the way that we think about this.
Yeah, just to add on top of what Jason mentioned, there are two other points which I wanted to add. One is we have to keep security aspect, which is very central to the entire 5G, because 5G is a very complex network. And especially when you're working on not just on one network, but amalgamation of different networks within the enterprise segment. So security needs to be looked at from a very deep lens in terms of how we're really securing our data, how we are securing our customers' data, so on and so forth. So that's one aspect which is gaining tremendous kind of traction and momentum in the market. The second part is, we have to make sure that whatever we implement as a 5G strategy, it has to integrate with your existing infrastructure, your applications, your data, your processes, all of those, because you cannot just throw away your existing applications by saying, hey, this is not 5G enabled, so let me just check it out. It's not possible. So we have to make sure that we need to integrate the existing systems, processes, because that's where I think the critical decision of how much you want to spend and how the cost must shoot up will definitely be a big factor. So that overlay is extremely important.
And I guess the last area that I'll go to is, again, looking at the importance of leadership. We've picked out some of these issues, these challenges. What role does high quality leadership in the 5G space play to make sure those kind of challenges are planned for and overcome?
Yeah, I mean, it's critical, right? Because things are going to break, things are going to stop working, things are going to, maybe do some chaotic things that you weren't expecting, right? I think that's, we're in a little bit of a new area here. So I think, one, just having the commitment that it's going to be a little bit messy, and being able to lead a team, through that. Again, looking for quick wins to celebrate and keep the momentum going. And then, I would say education is a big piece too, right? So, new technologies, distributed database technology that is so different than the monolithic, database architectures of the past, but it enables a whole bunch of new use cases. Ravi mentioned security, which is, super critical, especially a lot of the use cases we talked about. Maybe it's real-time sports betting, but that's actually regulated. So that has to be protected and controlled. It has, connection to your credit card and your bank account, but also, HIPAA and high trust and, things like that on the healthcare side that are super important to make sure that we're protecting individuals' healthcare, data and doing the right things with it. So I think there's a lot of elements there, but, education, building the right team, and really keeping the focus on moving forward with the right KPIs that I think we've talked about a bunch.
I think if you look at ever since we started talking about 5G, we're not just talking about network, right? We're also talking about the technology aspect of it, which is people are very much aware of what AI can deliver, how IoT can be looked at from the lens of 5G, augmented reality, virtual reality, content delivery, identity management, so on and so forth. So if you look at from a leadership perspective, one side of the fence that where you're looking at what network can deliver, how the infrastructure can deliver the value, but you're also looking at how this technology landscape is going to change in the 5G world, right? And when you put this combination, the third combination is the technology and network is actually delivering my business value or not. So in the past, when we used to talk about this leader is a business leader or a technology leader, that concept is going away because every leader has to think from all three different dimensions and bring that together in a 5G world. So that is one part of what I sense is a big change that we need to bring as a leaders. The second part is very, very much strategic thinking. It is not about what we want to do today and how we want to deliver value, but how we really want to drive this entire vision and strategy, for next 3 years or 5 years from that perspective, because having that view can really help you to put a strong business case, but also a clear business outcomes that you can define. And Jason mentioned about the KPIs, which is extremely, extremely important to marry the two in terms of your strategic thinking and the KPI. And the last but not the least, which we also touched upon, is collaboration, but collaboration from the lens of innovation, because you want every individual or a stakeholder in the 5G ecosystem to be very, very innovative, because you want it to fail fast, because you don't want to drag this entire program for 1 year and then realize that you have spent millions and it's not delivering value. So you have to really fail fast, and that can only happen when you have collaborative approach with all the people who are impacted by this or who are getting benefited out of this to come together, do that innovation, have that innovation mindset, and drive it to the business outcomes.
I think that suggestion there of the old suggestion of being a great business leader or a great tech leader, and the two being one and the same now, that's a lovely place for us to finish, I think. Ravi, Jason, we've covered a tremendous amount of ground, some fantastic advice, some fantastic examples. Thank you so much for joining us at Cloud and 5G Live today.
Thank you very much, Neil. Pleasure to be here.
Thanks, Neil.
Thank you. Really appreciate your time.